Hey traders, welcome to Charts and Coffee. Hope everyone's having a good morning. We are going to take a look at what we are dealing with 27 minutes before the bell. So by the way, we started this conversation off yesterday in the free video. And if you haven't checked that out yet, if you head on over to the Simpler Trading YouTube channel, which many of you are on right now, you'll see a video called Tomorrow's Game Plan, right? And so every morning, and I know most of you, especially if you're here in Charts and Coffee, you know your workday doesn't start at 9:30. It might start at 8:30, it might start at 9, it might start at 9:15 Eastern, but you are not waiting for the bell to ring to get to work, right? You're already preparing what your watch list is. You're thinking about trade management on some of your trades. You're looking at the pre-market, right? So pre-market is that preparation. So whether you want to call it pre-market or before the bell prep, it's the same thing. It starts with the futures contracts though, right? It starts with understanding where the 23-hour conversation every day is happening. And the easiest way to do that is S&P, NASDAQ, Dow, Russell, bonds, notes, crude, gold, even VIX. So we're getting a little bit of a pullback today. So again, what do we know pre-market? And these are things that I listed in that video. So please do check that out. It will give you a way to sort of anchor yourself into, at least for the morning, what your game plan could be. Right? We're always talking probabilities, never certainties. But when we're starting off the day below the, for example, previous session close, right? That's what I call that PSC. Us traders love acronyms, right? So that's all that it is. It's nothing fancy. It's just a previous session close. And that is the 4 p.m. Eastern cash close. So when the bell rang, where did the NASDAQ, S&P, Dow, Russell, where do those futures contracts that are still moving and grooving though, where do they close? So that's really what this right here is telling me. And we are below the previous session close. So I see what the number was. I see how much we're down by. All right, so these are things that are good to know. It's a really simple sentiment line in the sand, right? Are people waking up bullish or bearish? Are they waking up optimistic or pessimistic? Now, traders should always wake up optimistic as long as price action is moving and within normal ranges. So far, we are very much in normal ranges. How do I know that? I know that because the tools on my chart measure a number of things, not just whether we're up and down from the close, but what is the momentum? What is the trend? What are the historical price movement ranges telling me? Is this a normal kind of day? Yeah, it's just down. Right now, that means that we're going to wake up looking for day trading long puts, or for those of you that short shares or short futures contracts. That's all that's telling you. I'm getting a heck of a lot of sun coming in. Hang on one sec. Let's move that over. There we go. So that's a little better. So if we are looking at this pre-market preparation, if you watch the video, you know there's a few other things you can look at. This is the most basic. All right. And as always, gang, if you have any questions, type them on in. Let me know what you're looking at. Let me know if you're already in it or looking to get in it. Let me know what time frame. Let me know if you're bullish or bearish. Okay. So I'll keep an eye out for those questions. If I look at, again, pre-market, what's pre-market? Anything before the bell, right? But we know there are a few key times that we can take a look at. And that can be 4 a.m. when the Asian session closes. That could be 7 a.m. when the volume and volatility start to increase in the U.S. It's not an open, but it's kind of a soft open. You'll see a lot of decisions. Let's take a look at 7 o'clock. A lot of decisions start to get made. So we were moving sideways since the Asian session closed. So that is Sydney, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, right? So what's open right now? You have the European and UK sessions already underway, and the US session is about to start, right? In about 23 minutes. Okay, so now what do we know? Since 7 a.m., we're below the point of control. We're also in a downtrend. How do I know that? I look at my multi-structure sitting here at the bottom of my screen. This is the top tier multi-structure. What is its job? Right? It's not all knowing, all seeing, no indicator is, but what is its job? And ask that of each one of your indicators, because it'll make sure as you're processing all the information on your chart. And granted, I have a lot of information aside from the candles on my chart, but each one has a job, right? So when you're thinking, when I'm looking at my, let's use golf bag full of clubs. I love that analogy because it works. I'm not going to play all 18 holes, or if I'm just playing 9. I'm not playing with one club, right? Traders don't do the same thing either. But a great golfer knows which club to grab based on the shot. What is the shot? What's the environment? What's the distance of the pin? Where is the line? What's the wind, etc. Right? We do that too. We assess it. We look at our bag of indicators. We say, hey, what are you telling me about what I'm dealing with this morning? Really simple, yeah? Okay, so I know, again, what's the job of this tool down here? To tell me what's going on with momentum, to tell me what's going on with trend, both of which, as you can see, are kind of a magenta color. I guess that's magenta, yeah? That's down. All right, so I know I'm dealing with some weakness on the open, below the previous session close, below the point of control, etc. All right, now as the morning continues, I'll have a couple other things that will give me some levels to look at. And again, all of this is happening before the bell. So when traders say, Rog, what's a good, and I don't even like the word routine necessarily anymore, because look, if the answer was always having some sort of morning routine, or, we'd all be fine, but we don't follow them all the time. But if you have a process, if the process is, I get up a little bit earlier, I get over to the charts at least by whatever time you're comfortable with. 9 is a good time, right? Which is why we start the show, so we can do this process together. Have these processes, and then say, okay, this is where the NASDAQ is before the bell. And rather than waiting for the bell, we already have a pretty good idea of what we're dealing with. So you can see here on the S&P, pretty much the same story. Yeah, so the S&P is down about 0.35%. It's below the previous session close. It's actually this is your point of control right here. It's trying to get above the point of control, but it is in a downtrend. So what overrides everything? Structure. Structure overrides everything. If I have a downtrend, I've got to be looking for long puts or shorts, as long as that's the case. It is not unusual, though, that at the bell, now think about it, we have all this pent up interest. We have all these orders that are sitting out there that at the bell will get filled. How many times have we seen some strength in the morning only to see some massive volatility right on the bell? And that's not unusual, right? The bell rings, we might see a little bit of a shift. That's certainly possible here. So it doesn't hurt to let that initial wave of participation, that pent up interest in the market, it doesn't hurt to let some of that pent up, those orders, let them get cleared. That's why they call it the clearing range, by the way. That's what the first 30 minutes, some people look at it as the first 20, I like the first 30, is the clearing range. A lot of that stuff is cleared. Does that mean that's ultimately the direction for the rest of the day or even the rest of the morning? Not necessarily. But again, I can see where the sentiment would shift, right? So now I know which indicators, what their job is, even the color of the candles, right? If you have these pre-market levels, if you have these sentiment reads, now when the bell rings, you're already processing, you're already measuring. So that's something we do every morning. And, when we hop into the Sector Secrets Mastery Room, which, by the way, thinking, Rog, yeah, I'm lacking a practice. I'm lacking a process. I feel like a deer in the headlights when the bell rings. I don't know which way my directional bias should be. Come check out what we're doing, because that's not just for day trading. That's for all trading, right? That's for every style, whether you're a day trader, a short-term swing trader, or a longer-term swing trader. That same process, having those lines in the sand, really do help. And it starts pre-market. Okay, that being said, any questions on that? I see David's asking, is the point of control a candle and time? So the point of control is not a Ragheeism. The point of control is not anything proprietary. The point of control, or the POC, is a price level. It's a singular price level that has the most volume since a certain time. All right. How's that for some high level drawing? That's a clock, by the way. So it's a certain price level based on shares traded or contracts traded. based upon a certain time forward. So if I'm anchoring something at 7 a.m., I'm looking at from 7 a.m. forward, where were the most number of shares or contracts traded? And that's all that is. It's a really simple on a lot of platforms like TradingView. You can pull that up, but it's really part of something called volume profile, not time-based volume, but price-based volume. So by the way, I don't use time-based volume. I haven't in many, many years. My focus is going to be from a certain point forward. So in this case, 7, right? Moving forward, that's what we want to take a look at. Okay, so let's take a look then at the Dow, similar narrative. Look, it's down 0.09% from yesterday. Are these significant moves lower? No, they're not necessarily. So the other thing we ask ourselves is why might things be lower? That means we can look at an economic calendar. So let's jump over to an economic calendar. Did anything happen at 8:30? Were there any pre-market releases? We know that member Jefferson's going to be speaking at 11 a.m. That's to come. Nothing really pre-market. So then the other calendar, especially this time of year, that we need to take a look at is what's happening on the earnings front, right? What's coming out soon? What's coming out today? But not all the earnings. I don't need some cutesy calendar with a bunch of logos telling me what's happening each week. We can actually we can curate a list of names that are heavily weighted in the indices and in the sectors and follow those, because those are the ones that are going to have the most impact, right? And then we can take a look at things like the heavily weighted names, for example, the Magnificent Seven, right? Let's just start at the top of the alphabet, if you will. I would be Apple. Is Amazon down a little bit? 187. Not terrible, because you can see here we close at 188.70. So nothing major there. What about Apple? What might be happening pre-market in some of these? Apple is, as you can see, yesterday's previous session closed 181.70. We're at 182.45 pre-market. So that's up a little bit. You take a look at Microsoft, right? Same, so Microsoft is having a heavy day. We closed at 413. We're down at 408. What is that going to do? What is Microsoft going to do? It's single-handedly, because of its weighting, going to drag down all three of the indices. Not because it alone dictates it, but if it's having a disproportionate move, which we could say that's a pretty beefy move, 413.5 to 408.30, right? That's going to be a negative weight. It's going to be a weight on the Dow. It's going to be a weight on the S&P. And of course, it's going to be a weight on the NASDAQ. So we can see what could be dragging things down pre-market. What about Meta? Meta's down about $3, right? What about Google, which is a position we have in the Sector Secrets Mastery? What's Google up to? It's pulling back about $2. Right? So it's okay for things to be weak. We want to put it into context. Is it weakness based on earnings? Is it weakness based on news? Right? So what else are heavily weighted names? So we took a look at Amazon. Let's take a look at Tesla. Right? By the way, the broader markets are perfectly capable of moving higher or lower without Tesla. In fact, most of Q1's all-time highs in the S&P and NAS were as Tesla was still in a downtrend. So we can, one stock is not necessarily going to be the undoing. It depends on the proportion of the move. All right. So what about NVIDIA? NVIDIA is down about $10. It's down at $8.95. Now, for a $900 stock, is that a big move? Well, it's certainly not a bullish catalyst. It's not a bullish influence on the broader averages. But if you take a look at a handful of these stocks that are down, and you look at the margin to which we're down, we're having a slightly down day. Right? NAS is down just over 0.5% for now, right? For now. So what is Oracle up to? Sure. So is Oracle heavily weighted? It is weighted. I would not consider it heavily weighted. So when a stock is not heavily weighted, when a stock is not a name that has a high percentage weighting within the indices, I'd say Oracle is kind of low, medium low. Unless it has a large move, that small percentage weighting is not necessarily going to be that influential. So right now, you can see here, we closed at 118.34. We're at 117.93. So nothing catastrophic. And that brings up a really good point. Is the first 30 minutes difficult? Yes, it is I would say the two most volatile times in the market where there's a lot of opinion and a lot of moving and grooving is the first 30 minutes and arguably the last 30 minutes. So the open and the close. There's a lot of opinion. Are people expressing their opinion at 1:30? A little bit. Are they expressing a big opinion at 10:30? And again, I'm always talking East Coast time, a little bit, but that first 30 and that last 30, the way we open and the way that we close are going to be the most influential. So a lot of times, if you want to sort of, I will wait usually at least 10 minutes, by the way. Can we wait 30? Certainly no harm in waiting. But if you do some of this pre-market work before the bell, now we've got a better measuring stick. We put a ruler on the price action. So we have a pretty good idea of where things might be crossing some lines to more bullish sentiment or where things might be crossing lines to more bearish. And the most basic and arguably the most powerful is whether or not we're above yesterday's, right? Or below yesterday's close. All right. So yeah, I see a lot of you mentioning Nvidia's down, things like that. But remember, not everything is going to have equal impact to the NASDAQ, S&P, Dow, even Russell. Not everything is going to be necessarily weighted the same. They're not. So the percentage of the move does matter. And the lower the weighting, the more it has to move to create an effect. The higher the weighting, right, the less it has to move to create an effect. That's the high concentration world that we live in, right? And of course, yes, if you joined us for Top Tier Outlook, the show on Sunday, I mentioned we had, I believe, 8 or more different FOMC speakers. And from what I gather, Neil Kashkari yesterday had some hawkish things to say. So clearly, with the Federal Reserve's press conference, where Jerome Powell was very clear that a rate cut would precede any kind of rate hike, you still have a lot of FOMC members out there talking about hikes, which is never going to put the equity markets in a good mood until Jerome says, no, that's not really our plan. Remember, the only person who is empowered to speak on behalf of the Federal Reserve is the chair, right? Not Kashkari, not Bowman, not Williams. They all have their opinions, and some of them are voting members, so their opinion might mean a little bit more. But the only person who's really empowered to speak on behalf of the Federal Reserve is the chair. That's why they have that title and that seat at the table. And if we take a look again at where we are, the most important thing for me right now is going to be whether or not the S&P can remain above the anchored VWAP of the first of the year, something we've talked about a lot in some of the previous free videos. So this is things we've talked about in Charts and Coffee and the free videos that I've posted. And it's going to be very important for me to continue to see the VIX ideally below 15. And if those things are in place, we should have at least price action. And this is not a directional assessment on the VIX, but we should have at least price action moving in a normal range. Normal ranges are great. Normal ranges mean more predictable follow through. We're not exceeding the standard deviations of what we would typically see in terms of price movement, session to session, or even hour to hour. So far, nothing really here other than it seems to be we're pulling back a bit. All right. So ultimately, what we want to remember is there's a lot of things we can do before the bell. Put those lines in the sand on your chart, and then we'll see what happens here in about 9 minutes. All right, so I'm off to the Sector Secrets Mastery. And again, if anyone wants to check out what we do, follow up on discussions like this, come check out what we're doing at sectorsecrets.com. I'll see y'all tomorrow, same time, same station. Be good to each other.